Hi, I'm Hannah Durden and you're listening to the Outdoors Group podcast. This podcast is a call to arms to get children and young people outside again. It's your one-stop shop for all things outdoor, child, young person and education related. Thanks for tuning in. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Sam Kendall. Sam's the head of school learning at the Eden Project and has been a member of the Eden Schools team since it opened in 2001. She's taught in schools in Bristol, Cornwall, Karachi, which you'll have to tell me if I've pronounced that right in a second, Sam, and South Africa prior to joining Eden, and has recently completed an MSc in Environment and Human Health. She's joined me today to talk about the educational work that the Eden Project does, and in particular, their new programme that supports early career teachers. Thanks for joining me, Sam.
Oh, thanks for having me, Hannah. Pleasure to be here.
Oh, good. I think I might have bungled that pronunciation as well. I was trying to practice it before I came on. Karachi, is it?
Karachi, in Pakistan.
Karachi. There we go. So I'll start. While a lot of our listeners will have heard of the Eden Project, particularly those who are local, we do have listeners from further afield. So if you could just take a moment to explain what the project is and what it does, that'd be great.
Yeah, of course. So the Eden Project is it's a charity. It's a global movement, and we are working with people and with nature to respond to the planetary emergency. What that looks like is, well, at the moment, one extraordinary place in Cornwall, but soon to be not the only Eden Project, fingers crossed, which is a visitor attraction. So people come here for an enjoyable and hopefully educational day out with their friends and family. And that is this place in Cornwall, where I'm speaking to you from now, is a China clay quarry, was a China clay quarry that was coming towards the end of its economic life. And was 25 years ago a big white wet muddy hole. And so that's a really important part of our story, is that sense of transformation, because what we've got here now is one of the biggest greenhouses in the world, which contains a tropical rainforest and tells stories of plants and people and places from all those tropical regions of the world. There's a Mediterranean biome, so very familiar to lots of us from sunny Mediterranean holidays, and full of stories and plants. There's grapes, there's olives, there's date palms, all that kind of stuff in there, and all set within this great big outdoor gardens global garden as well. So yeah, so this place in Cornwall tells the story of people's fundamental relationship with nature and aims to reconnect people with nature through the medium of plants, if you like, so through the plants that we all use every single moment of every single day, and we're so kind of surrounded by them that we're plant blind, we're nature blind, aren't we? You know, that every time you take a breath, every time you put a piece of food in your mouth, every time you take a drink, that plants and the natural world are part of that story. So this place is a kind of a great big exercise in disguise removing, I suppose, to show people how you are, however urban and 21st century you are still fundamentally part of, not apart from, the natural world. And that's one really, really good reason that we should be doing a better job of looking after it.
Yes, absolutely. So you've been with Eden since they opened in 2001, so quite a long time now. What made you want to join the team? Was there something in particular that made you go, oh, right, I've got to be part of that?
Yeah, so Eden started, I was in my kind of late 20s and I was teaching in Bristol, but I'm from Cornwall, so I was brought up here. So there was a Cornwall thing, but also I've had two sort of in my career, such as it is, there's been kind of two key strands, and that's education. I've always been involved in particularly children's education, teaching and learning, and environment and outdoors and connection to nature. And so when I kind of heard of the Eden Project, and it was, you know, or this snippet of an idea, and it was in my home place of Cornwall, I was like, oh, maybe there was a plan to all of those things I've been doing. Perhaps it all makes sense. And then one very damp New Year, in fact, in the late 90s, I spent New Year volunteering at the Lost Gardens of Heligan, which were at that point still lost. They weren't the, rediscovered glorious things they are now. They were glorious and romantic in a different way. And they wheeled out the big boss to come and inspire the damp, chilly volunteers, which was Tim Smith. And he's incredibly charismatic. And basically I was sort of, at that point I was like, oh, where do I sign? How do I get involved with this? And that was even before Eden was even a thing. So yeah, when I kind of heard Eden, environment, education, Cornwall, and this bloke that I'd heard speaking, a couple of years before was one of the key co-founders of it, I kind of made it my business to get involved.
Yes, ticked all the boxes for you, obviously.
Yeah.
So over the last 20 years, you must have done quite a lot of different things with Eden as it's kind of developed and changed. What are some of the highlights, and also what is your role involved now?
Okay,
so that's 2 questions really.
Yeah, 2 questions. So my role now is I am head of school learning at the Eden Project. So I look after a team that delivers all of our school education and engagement, linked to our mission, which is that working with nature to respond to the planetary emergency. So we've got a pretty broad palette of topics and curriculum areas to play in, but all linked to, what does a more regenerative way of living and being on this planet look like for all of us. So we run schools programs. So we have, hundreds, sometimes thousands of children and young people a week come and get engaged with those programs, which link to curriculum, link to our mission, and link to the opportunities for learning here. And then we also do lots of work enabling teachers and schools to shift and evolve the way that they're doing their teaching and learning to being a more nature-centered, outdoor-led way of being. So all linked to the curriculum. That's kind of a particular thing of ours, is that we're interested in how you can create learning opportunities for all the children all the time that are connected to outdoors. So we run training courses, we create resources, we work with schools occasionally in a kind of quite a grand way on a whole rethinking of their outdoor landscape and their approach to teaching and learning outdoors, but all spiraling around that opportunities to build our relationship with and become better stewards of the natural world. So that's what I do now, and that's been my role for, although it's expanded and developed, and now I'm also involved in Eden Project Morecambe, which is half funded, and we've been doing lots of work with our colleagues in China developing the programs for Eden Project Qingdao as well. And the highlights have been many. I sometimes say, things that would have been like a once or twice a career opportunity in school come around pretty frequently here. And but it's all about the people. And, so partly my highlight isn't really a highlight because it's every day. I'm super proud of my team and the work that we do every day. And it's a pleasure, coming to work and doing that good work as part of a brilliant team of people. And also I really love the diversity of people and opportunities that kind of Eden name brings in, so actually I don't just work with people who have a really similar skill set to me. I get to work with all kinds of different people with all kinds of expertise, and I really, really love that. It's
kind of an extension of learning, I guess, because you can learn from them and they can learn from you, which is just that kind of lifelong learning journey.
Absolutely. And if I was going to kind of summarize, try and encapsulate our role as a team, we're expert educators. We're not experts on horticulture or we're all right on sustainability, but actually our role is to kind of hoover up those stories and those narratives from Eden and its projects and its partners, and then bundle them into meaningful learning opportunities for our audiences that we really know a lot about.
Yeah. Oh, it just sounds fantastic.
It's not too shabby. And also, working somewhere really beautiful is really incredible, and not a thing, when it's kind of like, oh, when you're doing what would you like your career to involve? Nobody mentions that, but actually that's a real bonus, coming to work somewhere physically really beautiful,
Yeah. My kids did one of your workshops, which was like a cocoa kind of chocolate one, and they loved it. We were all just absolutely blown away. It was such a brilliant workshop a couple of years ago. And
I did get to meet Ray Mears, and I have clapped eyes on Sir David Attenborough, so in terms of
wow, that is awesome.
I know.
And you've had, like, I know it's not in the education side, but you've had a lot of famous rock stars and musicians and stuff at Eden as well over the last few years.
Yeah. I don't get to hang out with them, but I have seen a few great gigs here as well.
Yeah, it must be such an amazing venue for live music.
Yeah. Also, the arena is on a slight gradient, and I'm quite short, so I can actually usually find a spot where I can actually see the artist in question as well, which is always nice.
Yeah. So if we go back to education, although I could talk about music for ages as well, but that's probably another podcast. How have you found that kind of nature-based learning lands with young people that might not have experienced this kind of thing before?
So I think you need to slightly frame that by nature-based learning done well.
Yes, yeah.
So that's one of the things, is that and the reason that my team are all teachers is actually our focus is on creating really brilliant learning opportunities and we sometimes talk about that being in nature, about nature, from nature, for nature. So there's a huge array of possibilities there. And we have the advantage of novelty as well, which is great, because we're not the children and young people's regular teachers, and we've also got this really amazing kind of backdrop and setting to do the work. So if you get all of the other things right, then nature will also do its job and do the magic, because there is so much there, so many possibilities to provoke curiosity, to create connection, to give children and young people opportunities to be agents of their own learning and to some degree their own destiny. So yeah, it works when you do it right. It totally works.
Actually, that's a really good point about doing it right. I spoke to someone the other day who was talking about a school where they'd been doing bug hunts every year from reception to year 6, but when they dialed down they found that they weren't progressing or doing anything different. So you think by the time you've got to year 6 and you're given these bug pots again to go into the grounds that are like just a few scrubby trees, you're probably thinking, oh, like again, like honestly. So yeah, I guess that done right is the key, isn't it?
Yeah, with the same diligence in terms of progression and assessment and differentiation that you would apply to any other kind of learning as a serious person. We use all the time an approach that we've kind of dubbed story inspired learning or story led learning. So we use, and it's an evolution of Earth education ideas actually, but the idea that you use a story or a narrative as a hook for the learners. So we know that hang on, I'll go on to that point. So yeah, there's always a reason and a purpose to be doing it. And So, your kids who came and did the chocolate workshop, that's all about becoming chocologists. And if you can complete the challenge and find out the information, and report back in a certain way, then you've successfully completed your chocologist challenge. But we use that idea, and we use it all the way through up into A level, and even with university groups and beyond. Obviously they're different stories, but particularly in a place like this where you only get to meet children and young people a really short amount of time, we find that hook in to learning really, really important. And also, I think there's a thing about what are the young people learning other than just information about nature? And what are they learning in terms of their skills? What are they learning in terms of values, which is a really important kind of driver and structure for the programs that we create as well. The bigger picture is, who are the sorts of learners, the sorts of people who are going to become future stewards of this amazing planet that we live on, and that's not just about the facts and information they know. That's about, a whole holistic bit of thinking about what kinds of people they are.
Yes, yeah. And I'm guessing you have quite a broad range of kids from all over the place coming. It's not obviously not just local kids coming to the school, to the site.
So for a day trip, there's a kind of Penzance to Exeter sort of.
Yeah, it's a bit far otherwise.
Up to Bude. Otherwise, when you're in more time on the coach than at the attraction, it's a bit annoying, I think. Prior to the pandemic, we had a youth hostel on site, and we had children and young people from all over the place. But still, people are, often groups who are down on a residential in Cornwall will come to visit us here. So a real diversity, and also that just because children and young people live in Devon and Cornwall doesn't necessarily mean that they've got a particularly naturey or outdoor life.
That's true.
There's plenty of examples, of opportunities not being taken to go and engage with that stuff, which maybe is a little bit closer. But actually, if you haven't got a car, for example, in Devon and Cornwall, it can be incredibly difficult to access opportunities.
Yeah, that's true. I spoke to some people that work on Dartmoor recently, and they bring school groups up from Plymouth, and they were saying that in these school groups, often you've only got 2 out of 30 that have ever been to Dartmoor before. And I thought, well, the proximity is so close, but they said, well, it's, if the parents have got a car, if the parents know where to go. So actually, you're right. It's not a given that you love and know nature just because you live in a very beautiful area of the world.
And there are children in Cornwall who haven't been to the beach.
Which is just mind-blowing, isn't it, when you think that people come from all over the world for the Cornish beaches. But, what I'd written a question about your previous experience of teaching, but now I'm looking at it, I'm not sure exactly how I've worded it is right. But I guess really I'd just like to think about how you see it now compared to like your previous experiences. Were you working kind of mainstream schools before you came to Eden?
So I did some slightly crazy, before I was qualified, I volunteered in a school in Pakistan and a school in South Africa. And then I taught, and I worked in mainstream just for 3 years after I did my PGCE. Eden, this slightly sideways perspective on teaching and learning has been my main experience.
Do you think the people obviously, as you said, you have got the novelty factor at Eden, but do you think, generally speaking, the way that you guys do it is more engaging than what they might get in a classroom? And if so, like, why do you think that might be?
I think we've got loads playing to us to help us be more engaging. There's that novelty thing, and loads of engaging learning happens in a gazillion classrooms around the place all the time, obviously. But we've got an incredibly passionate group of teachers who are kind of fresh all the time, because we've got that sort of slight it's a bit of a theatre show, as you know,
Yeah.
there's a mix between acting and teaching almost. We build in, there's a physical thing. I think a lot of classrooms have got incredibly static, and we seem to have forgotten that children's brains exist in their bodies. And so we make sure that we build in lots of physical as well as the kind of intellectual. And then we've got this incredible sensory experience of, you know, being in these different spaces. It's beautiful, it's colourful, there's the sound of the waterfall in the rainforest. So I think the opportunities for us to create a really holistic, and therefore much more likely that something that you're doing is going to meet something in each of the children in front of you, is kind of right there for us, you know.
And so I guess actually what you're just saying about remembering that children need to move and like having a good sensory environment, is that, so I'm going to move on to the program that you guys are doing to support early career teachers. So maybe I'll come back to that in a second. Actually, I was going to say, those are the kinds of things that you might mention on that program, but then I thought, well, actually, let's talk about what the program is first. So obviously, we know there's a high dropout rate for new teachers, and you guys are trying to work to help these teachers reconnect with why they entered the profession. So yeah, let's start at the beginning, and you can explain what the program is.
So we had an incredible opportunity initiated by a really visionary multi-academy trust called the Learning in Harmony Trust, who have schools, they're modest sized MAT, with primary and special schools in London, East London and Southend. And they approached us probably a couple of years ago to talk about their COVID cohort of early career teachers and exploring whether there was something we could do together to really kind of lift up this cohort. And it took us a couple of years to figure it out, but in December they brought a cohort of 16 early career teachers to Eden Project for the weekend. And the aim, there was a kind of three-stranded approach to the thing, really. So one was a real focus, an unashamed focus on well-being, on really celebrating the work that these ECTs have done and are doing, on allowing them to bond as a group, because they hadn't had, you know, they had very little in-person time as a group because pandemic, and you know, just to shower them with love and loveliness. It was Christmas at Eden, the lights were on, the weather was amazing. So there was that. Then the second strand was really about a coaching focused approach. So the colleague that I run it with, Alex Bell, is from Portland Education, is an ex-head teacher, school leadership coach. And that was really, really focused on their why of being in the profession. So what we decided is that the early career framework does a great job on kind of what and how of teaching, but that perhaps there's not loads of opportunity to connect and reconnect with your purpose and your why of being in the profession. And we wonder, we haven't done the randomized control trial on this by any stretch of the imagination, whether actually that connection with your purpose might be the thing that keeps you moving forward when it gets tough. And it is, it's a hard, demanding job. So we spent lots of time just, working in individually and in small groups and in conversation focused on that. And then the third strand was, as you just suggested, grown from Eden's why. So that was all about nature focused, curriculum linked outdoor learning and the bigger picture of learning for sustainability. But that weirdly isn't the kind of core drive of the program. It's not to come to Eden and learn how to be a nature and sustainability focused teacher. That was an opportunity to share our why, and also for, you know, it was really valuable and real news for some of these teachers who, I think, you know, it's maybe the case that there are teachers entering the profession who haven't had that kind of teaching and learning experience as learners. You know, they're kind of national curriculum generation children who have had this kind of relatively linear, straight kind of experience of the education system. So that was really, and so we did lovely things like making lamps and writing nature colour inspired poetry and that kind of thing alongside it. And it was really powerful. There's a little film on YouTube that I'm sure we can share in the notes. But yeah, and I think as well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because in other professions, it's completely legitimate, the idea that you should pour some love into your new entrants to kind of inspire them to bond and connect to their career and stay in the profession. And it's really not expected that we would do that for our early career teachers. And I'm interested in that.
So what counts as an early career teacher? Like, how newly qualified do they have to be, if that makes sense?
So ECT, early career teacher, was NQT, so your first year, and then you also get ECT plus ones as well. So the early career teacher framework, the government's framework, wraps up that first 2 years in the classroom.
And so it's the aim to hopefully run these regularly these weekends?
So Learning in Harmony Trust have booked for their next cohort next year. Brilliant. They're going to be bringing a slightly bigger cohort, which is really exciting. And then we've got conversations with various people with different multi-academy trusts, and also we're exploring we're trying to fundraise for it so that we could make it as either an open course that people from lots of different mats and schools could come to, or somehow like heavily subsidize it. So that's one of the jobs on the to-do list at the moment, is making it
do some
financially appealing for people.
And so where do they stay when they come down? Do they stay within Eden or nearby?
We haven't really got any accommodation at the moment, so they stayed at the Premier Inn.
Okay.
But we went ice skating and had pasties and cream teas at Eden as part of the thing.
Excellent.
Did some yoga in the biomes, that kind of thing.
That's cool. Oh, I can't imagine how amazing that'd be. It'd be like that sweaty yoga, wouldn't it, if you did it in the
rainforest? We got in early in December. It was fine. It was absolutely fine.
So how did that first weekend go? What kind of was the feedback you were getting from the teachers that had attended?
It was really positive. They properly loved it. They felt the love, which was great, because that was what we intended. And they really valued being valued, feeling valued. And they really valued the opportunity to be away from work but thinking about work. I always find that really useful when I go to a conference or something. I don't know about you, being in a sort of work head but not at work. You always have good thoughts, and so they definitely found that to be the case. And at the moment, we're probably due a little review with them. We've sent them their postcards that they wrote themselves, and their daffodils that they planted whilst they were here are coming up, but we're probably due a little check-in kind of 3 months later.
Oh, that's awesome. Such a brilliant idea to and I think you're right, because you hear lots of private companies doing like away days and team days and stuff where the focus is on bonding and well-being and things, but we don't hear about that for people in public service, do we? And for teachers, they just kind of get thrown in there and get on with it, and what they do is so hard. So so lovely that you guys are doing something to kind of nurture them.
Yeah, it was a real pleasure. Alex, my co-facilitator, and I both felt like we chucked all of our, between us, 50 years of facilitation wisdom and experience at it, and it really it's rare and really wonderful when you run something like that for the first time, and at the end of it you're kind of like, yeah, I wouldn't really, I maybe would have got the cream. I would have put my jam on first on my scone, but that's basically the level of, tweaking that you're doing for the thing. Then, we were chuffed.
Excellent. Sounds like you're definitely onto a good thing. I know you're a very busy lady, so I don't want to keep you too much longer. But before I go to my last 3 questions, was there anything else you wanted to tell us today that we haven't kind of talked about?
I guess watch this space in Eden Project Morecambe. So I don't know if any of your listeners saw the announcement that as part of the Levelling Up funding, Eden Project Morecambe was granted £50 million, which is half of the money you need to build an Eden Project these days. Exciting. So that's tremendously exciting. There's been huge amounts of work going on already with schools and the college and the university in Lancaster and Morecambe, developing what they're calling the Morecambe Bay curriculum, which is a kind of place-based curriculum for sustainability for their place. So we're really excited about the opportunity to work more closely there.
Will there be greenhouses?
Sorry?
Will they have greenhouses at that one as well?
They are. So the underpinning mission about connection with nature in response to the planetary emergency is the same, but the narrative, the story will be about the rhythms of nature, so informed by the kind of the tides and the cycles of the bay. And the design they look like giant mussel shells.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So very cool. And also we've got one of our teacher training opportunities coming up in March as well, which is an online outdoor learning course over 4 afternoons called Leaders in Outdoor Learning.
Excellent.
And people who've done it have spoken really highly of both the content but also the sense of being part of a really supportive community of practice as well. So and we've already got some schools from the Morecambe Bay area involved, and a school in Kenya sending a couple of teachers on that as well. Awesome. So we should have a really interesting group of participants for that.
Brilliant. Oh, well, I'll put that in the show notes as well if there's a link somewhere.
Cool. So, I'll send you the link.
Brilliant. So finally, just before we go, because it's a nice way to end, I've got just 3 questions to ask, and the first one is, how do you relax?
In motion, outdoors.
What a great answer.
Walking, cycling, swimming, yoga.
Yeah.
And then if I'm not in motion, I'm sat outside our van drinking tea.
Excellent. Perfect answer. And what are you reading or listening to right now? So that could be music or podcasts or.
I'm reading a really interesting book by an academic called Richard Layard, called Can We Be Happier?
Okay.
And the premise is that GDP is a really rubbish single metric to have to judge the success of your country on, basically. And so his premise is that happiness, being a more useful word than well-being, because you can't be well-being or that kind of thing, but you can be happier. That what would it look like if we took happiness, i.e. total population well-being, as our metric, and what would different sectors, what would teachers do, what would health professionals do, what would economists do if happiness was our single kind of unifying metric rather than GDP. It's really interesting.
Really interesting. Yeah, it sounds really interesting. Is it quite an easy read, or is it quite?
It's a surprisingly accessible read. It's quite fat, but it's okay.
Yeah, excellent. Awesome. And finally, why is being outdoors important to you?
I think so. I am both nosy and fidgety. So outdoors is the best place for me to be to fulfill my my fidgeting and moving and curiosity needs.
Yeah. Excellent.
Because there's always something. There's always something interesting in nature.
Something to pick up. Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Sam. I've really appreciated it. I've really enjoyed chatting to you.
No, absolute pleasure. Thanks for your time too.
Yeah, you're really welcome. Another massive thank you to Sam from the Eden Project for coming to talk to us all about the educational work that the Eden Project does with children, with schools, with teachers, with educational professionals. I really enjoyed chatting to Sam, and I hope that those of you listening enjoyed listening to it just as much. So here we are, we're on the 3rd season of the Outdoors Group podcast, and I just want to say a big thank you to everyone that's listened to us so far and anyone that's got in touch to talk to us about the podcast. We really appreciate it. As always, we would love it if you would like the podcast, rate it, subscribe, share it with your friends just so that more people can find us. We'll be back in a fortnight with a really, really awesome conversation with Dr. Naomi Fisher. So I really hope you'll tune back in for that. And until then, thanks for listening.